Attention to detail. Don't write a map.
Let me see this right.
Good evening. I'd like to call to order the City of Albany Budget Committee meeting. May we have a roll call, please?
Sykes.
Here.
Vernig. Brenneman. Here. Keller.
Here.
Canopa.
Here.
Folden.
Here.
Olson.
Here.
Summers.
Here.
Kellum.
Here.
Alex Johnson.
Here.
Coburn.
Here.
Bessie Johnson. Here. Thompson.
Here.
Thank you. Peter has some remarks to start with, and are you going to touch on what's on the, what we have in handouts here in front of us, or?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So good evening, Chair Folden and Budget Committee members. This is our third Budget Committee meeting reviewing the 2019-21 budget. And our department directors are here again this evening. And I suspect that even Jorge is watching. He may channel through Chris Bailey's iPad again. One thing I'd like to bring to your attention, staff will be making an adjustment based on council approval of an interfund loan from the utility billing IT equipment account to fund the installation of LED lights in City Hall. At this point, the amount is expected to be about $150,000, and it'll be included in the budget presented to council. Several questions were asked at our last meeting, and these were answered by email. I'll provide those answers again for the purposes of wider dissemination. And we also have the answer to the CARA question tonight that was asked. So the first one was, how many books are borrowed by Albany library users from other libraries within the library consortium? And the answer is that Albany users borrowed 2,341 items from the consortium in 2018, and those items represent a purchase value of about $47,000 and 41% of all items borrowed. Just before we convened or sat down, Councilor Kellum let me know that that was actually a two-part question, and he was asking also about books that went the other way, and we'll get that for you. The committee asked for some clarity on budgeted FTE. We forwarded a personnel change report and a listing of budgeted FTE by program with revisions that were made on Friday. In summary, Maple Lawn preschool cuts were moved to the second year. Fire department showed a reduction of 2.0 FTE in the first year. These were vacant positions. And another reduction of 1 FTE in the second year, which is an expected retirement. Police showed a reduction of 4.0 FTE in the first year, which are vacant positions, no layoffs, and further reductions of 3.0 FTE in the second year through attrition from expected retirements. The reductions in FTE for IT, library, and municipal court were also listed. Another question was, how much does the city pay for health insurance? The total cost for health insurance for 2018 was $7.4 million. The total employee contribution was $304 million, and the city's annual contribution was $7.1 million.
You mean 304,000?
304,000, right?
304,000, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's a lot of money. Okay.
Yeah, not 304 million. If I said that,
I'm like, I'm reading this number wrong.
Yeah. All right, moving on. How much revenue would be raised by increasing our franchise fees? Approximately $350,000 if fees were raised to the maximum permissible. With the exception of Republic Services and Northwest Natural, all other franchisees are paying the max allowable. Increasing Republic from 6 to 7% would yield approximately an additional $100,000. Increasing Northwest Natural from 5 to 7% would yield approximately $236,000 in additional revenue. And these numbers are based on 2018 data. Pursuing this revenue enhancement will require a determination of whether the existing agreement allows the increase before the term of agreement has ended, and whether a specific notification period is required. The fees would be passed on to the consumers of the services provided, and the proposed increase would require negotiation with the franchisee. Staff estimate that the process would take between 6 to 10 months. Now, how much revenue would accrue to the city if CARA was under-levied or sunsetted? Sophie Dicast and Gina Yeager have researched the question, and Sophie's prepared to give you a brief summary at this point.
So the first scenario would be to sunset CARA as quickly as possible or end it completely as quickly as possible. In that scenario, the full tax increment financing amount, the full TIF amount, would continue to go to CARA, and we would budget to pay off CARA's debt as quickly as possible, including some staff time. So we estimate that this would take about 5 years. At the end of that time, about 5 years, the district would not exist anymore, and the increment that was coming in would be returned to the taxing jurisdictions, and there would be no direct budget impact for the city or those other jurisdictions until that 5 years or that time period when the debt was all paid off. During this time, CARA would, of course, not take on any projects. The second scenario mentioned was under-levying CARA. So in this scenario, instead of collecting the full TIF amount that CARA collects now, it would only receive a percentage. So for example, just enough to cover debt service, which has to be covered, and then personnel and some operating costs. So the remaining TIF that CARA didn't take would be distributed proportionately back to the taxing jurisdictions, including the city. So for example, instead of taking the full approximate $3 million in TIF, CARA would just claim, say, $1.6 million for debt service, staff, some operations. Then the approximate 46% that was left would be distributed proportionately to the other taxing jurisdictions, including the city. The city's portion in this scenario, just these example numbers, would be about $500,000. And under this scenario as well, CARA would not take on any projects.
Okay. Thanks, Sophie. The Budget Committee, you all, should certainly know how CARA is funded, but the discussion about sunsetting or under-levying needs to happen within the CARA Board, which meets tomorrow night. The impacts of either option that Sophie laid out to you are significant and long-lasting and should not be considered as a quick fix to current budget concerns. Lastly, the last question I have here is, can we sell park properties? Parks and Recreation Director Ed Hodney provided a fairly comprehensive answer last Tuesday evening, but it's worth re-emphasizing that the sale of property that was purchased with Parks SDC funds would incur a legal obligation to pay back those funds, as well as any grant monies used for the purchase. In some cases, the city would also be required to replace the land with other land acquisitions. Again, this budget is a balanced and sustainable budget which takes steps to prepare the city for the very distinct possibility of more cuts 2 years from now. Last week, we discussed various options for revenue enhancement, and with the Budget Committee recommendation and council direction, the staff will explore these options further and present them for council consideration. As was the case last week, department directors are all here, perhaps even Jorge, and we're ready to take any questions you might have.
So the FTE that you reviewed, the positions have been restored. What other changes were made? If you, I saw the police, let's see, it's page 51, so wages there now reflect the full positions?
No,
No?
we did not update.
You just changed the FTE in the FTE sheet, but it's not anywhere in the
Even the
amounts of the budget.
FTE on the FTE sheet still shows those cuts, since we haven't yet decided on a direction in order to prevent those. They should still be on there. But I think they were all vacant positions that we are deleting.
Okay, so no.
Not until we,
They're just unfilled positions at this
They're unfilled
point. They're
positions.
budgeted for in this year, but unfilled right now. So they would
in
remain.
the current year, they're vacant. I mean, they'll be vacant in the next biennium, yeah.
Okay. So Sharon's request at the end of last meeting then hasn't yet been fulfilled.
We have looked at different options. We can answer questions about those options if you have them, but at this point, I don't, maybe Peter feels differently, but I don't think I think it really needs to be the Budget Committee's recommendation to council how we move forward with this.
What question was that again?
I believe it was something like, that she wanted to hear them to get creative and give her a suggestion for how to backfill the 500 and some thousand that it would take to fund the remaining police department positions.
Well, we did talk about that. Of course, you could, you can not put money toward the reserves that we had talked about. That's an option available to you, one that I wouldn't recommend, but.
Right, so there are two pages towards the back of the book, one that talks about the reserves, and you gave us updated sheets for that, for equipment reserves. So those were growing in the initial budget draft. You were recommending that we build those up, and that's why some of the cuts were necessary. And then there's also the level of contingency funds, which was drafted at 7% instead up from 5%, right?
6%, up from 5%.
Well, in the second year, it's,
Oh, right.
Oh, sorry, I'm talking about the second year number. Okay, so pulling back on either of those two things would free up some funds, obviously. But okay, Bill?
Well, my concern is that I think we're losing sight of the city manager's budget message that he gave us. Our budget's too big and the costs are too high, and I think we have to be willing to make some tough decisions. Like Rich said, it's time to put on our big boy. The economy is good, unemployment's low. I don't think the economy can get much better, but it's not going to last, and most of us can remember at least one recession or more in our lifetime, and staff has indicated that that's on the horizon. Our reserve funds are for emergencies and unforeseen situations, and the reserves used to be 12%, so how did it get to 5%? I don't remember any emergencies or unforeseen situations. I think we just slowly over the years reduced our reserves, and the same thing that Peter just mentioned, well, we could put less money in the reserves and do something else with the money. We haven't maintained an adequate level of funding in our equipment replacement funds. We've underfunded those for years and years. So instead of making these tough decisions, we just continue to kick the can down the road. And the focus seems to be on how to raise more revenue. We raised fees, talked about selling property, and establishing a utility or transportation fee. I get that. I understand both sides of the issue, and maybe there's a happy medium or compromise, but I just think we ought to remember what Peter's initial budget message was, because I think next year at this time we'll sit down and be able to make some adjustments and changes to the budget. I understand it's a 2-year budget. That doesn't mean we can't revisit it and make some changes, but I think it's going to be worse next year than it is this year.
Yes. I would agree with that. I don't think we need to add any more people to any department, including the police.
Rich?
I think making the tough decisions is why we're here. There are some that can be made. I noticed that while some of us said that 6 months was enough time, we ended up with a year of Maple Lawn remaining the responsibility of the city. I would point out three things. One, for the amount of money we're spending, I spoke with a preschool today. $9,000 buys full-time from 7:30 in the morning until 5:30 in the evening, 5 days a week. Excuse me.
Rich has the floor. There's no public comment this evening.
Was a 501c3. it's about the same dollars per hour, and it's not us doing it. Various people have said there isn't any, it's not the job of the city, I agree, but we are in the middle of it. But there are a couple of other things to be thought about, one of which is this is gigantically discriminatory against every person who pays the entire bill when they go to the Montessori school, or they go to First United Methodist, or any of the other churches, you know, the Catholic Church, or, I mean, we don't help anybody else's. We do some things, but we're not sending checks to pay the other people's bills. Even at the new prices, it's only about, what, a third of the total? It's, you know, it's, even without considering any of the expenses other than labor, this is being subsidized at 59%. Now, I don't think we ought to cut them off, but I think we need to do this quickly. And I think the way you do it quickly is you put a short time in it, so everyone has a great big incentive to deal with it. And I think that time is the end of the calendar year. That would save about half the amount of money, but more important, it's spreading the pain. I did find a couple of things rather disturbing. There is a penchant online to attack staff, to attack our Parks and Rec staff. And I think that is particularly reprehensible because these folks, they're doing what they're told. They're doing what is happening coming down from above, whether it's from the city manager or from the city council or this body. I mean, we're the ones that take the brickbats when it happens most of the time, and that's where it belongs. It does not belong with calling people names online or in phone calls or in emails or et cetera.
Bessie?
Since the last meeting, I had a citizen call me, and it was about the Carnegie Library. And this person is very much in favor of keeping police and fire whole. And he said, you know, instead of having two libraries, which you could combine them shouldn't be any problem. Then he says, what about, you know, we want to save the building, of course. He says, how good would that be to have someone go in there and do something with it, retail-wise, coffee shop or whatever, to enjoy the character of the building, rather than just having books sit in there. And I thought that was kind of an interesting idea. And I know it is about $200,000 to $300,000 for the library, Carnegie Library, and so I'm thinking that that's another decision that we need to think about, because why do we need two libraries? I mean, it's great, but we could still use have the building used in a way that more people could enjoy it than just the few people that go in there.
Ed, would you like to speak to that?
No. I wouldn't.
Dick?
Yeah. I'll point out that that library has a foundation that helps support it, helps support the whole library system. We buy some of the books. Are we still buying library cards, Ed, for people who are out of town? I think we are. We recently had work done on the windows of the Carnegie building. Foundation paid for Did we pay for half of it or all of it? All of it. I think we paid all of it. We paid half of having air conditioning put in the building. And there are a lot of people who enjoy that building as a library. The source of that foundation are two ladies who, quite a while ago now, thought it was an enjoyable building. One of them, Margaret Weatherford, gave the proceeds from the sale of her house, $250,000. And the other, Lucille Wilford, she gave $42,000, started the, we call it the Library Foundation Fund. We don't, although the Foundation Committee is thinking we really ought to call it the Carnegie Foundation because of pressure from some people who don't appreciate historic or enjoy historic buildings. So anyway, that foundation has grown to, what is it now, Ed? Is it 1.3 million? And we're...
It's in that ballpark.
Yeah, and we're, the tax people are after us to spend some of the proceeds so we don't get in trouble. And, you know, if you start cutting the enjoyable things out of our city, I think you'll find fewer and fewer people who are willing and able to support our city. And I presently have a neighbor who has his house for sale. And people coming out of town, of course I'm the nosy neighbor, when they're walking around I talk to them. And they say, what a nice town. And I have to agree, some people think it's still kind of slummy. But,
Dick, don't go there, buddy. Don't do it.
Well, you call it.
No, I haven't, Dick.
Yes, you have.
And you need to,
Okay, Dick has the floor.
man.
It's, but I still enjoy my 130-year-old house, and I can still climb up and down the stairs. And I really hate to see people want to tear down what's nice about Albany. So I'd be very much opposed to doing something different with the Carnegie Library.
So there was one question in my email earlier today that you were going to let John respond to about the recalculation, an increase in the ambulance fees, and
Right.
which payer sources would actually not pay the increase.
Yeah, correct. We, before we went to the council, we evaluated that based on our calls in fiscal year 2018. Currently, 78% of the invoices that we send out for medical calls are sent to Medicare or Medicaid patients, leaving 22% that are either private insurance, private pay, or auto insurance. So when we calculated how much that increase in revenue would be, it was based on the increased revenue from the 22%.
Okay.
There is some additional increases that do come from Medicare over the last 3 years. They have contributed about $5 to $10 additional per year. So it's not a large amount, but it's about an additional $30,000 that we would get from them. But when we did calculate it, we calculated it just on the expected revenue from what we would receive from the 22% of payers.
Okay. And part of that revenue was what was allocated over to Parks and Rec to help leave Maple Lawn in place for the school year, so 12-month time period. Okay.
So I just want clarification then. So the resolution that we have in front of us with the, all the numbers laid out per each fund, so is Maple Lawn added into these numbers?
Maple Lawn is included in
To
those
keep it
numbers.
for the year?
Yes,
Okay. And then for fire, you have those adjusted numbers then,
yes.
okay? And then police,
The 125,000.
okay? And
It's not included The additional 518,000 is not included in that resolution.
Okay, so it lacks 518. And then, what about the franchise fees increase? Do you have that factored in?
We do not, because we don't know at this point that those would actually go through.
Okay, so they're not into this, so none of that is actually reflecting on the FTEs for fire and police, what's in this resolution, then, right?
The resolution that fire is not going to lay off their people in the second year is reflected in both the position and in the appropriations resolution.
I mean, for the franchise fees portion, so is that
Oh, the
for,
franchise,
is that factored in for the second year?
No, remember,
No.
we talked about the franchise fees, that what they could yield, and the fact that we would need to figure out if it's within the term of the agreement on each of them, and then also negotiate it with the Northwest Natural and the Republic.
Okay,
So we don't even know if we can, if they're,
so
and that will
if,
take a little while as well.
so if we're able to, impose those fees, then we could also say we want that dedicated for keeping police whole.
Correct.
Right.
You could, yeah, you could devote those fees towards.
And that would be 350,000.
But isn't imposing franchise fees going to be passed on to consumers, right? So basically, it's a tax, what we're doing. We're adding a tax to the
It's
people.
it's an additional burden on
Correct.
ratepayers.
So my position on something, adding a tax to my constituents and also the city of Albany, I prefer to go to a vote because that makes no sense for us at this meeting to raise taxes without their input. They should have an opportunity to participate in the decision to raise their taxes. And I know we have a budget crisis going on. I know we worry about Maple Lawn and the library and other things, but raising taxes to solve a problem that was created by this mismanagement of funds or whatever you want to call it, we need to do a better job. So I'm opposed to adding any new taxes to my constituents or anybody in the city of Albany without their permission or at least their participation in the process.
So when it comes, Counselor, to franchise fees, the only thing we do have to go to the voters on is, by law, would be for property taxes. This franchise fees are not property taxes, that's fees, and we have the right to be able to just impose those fees and change them, and they've been historically always done like that. The same if we, imposed a utility fee, that is something within our realm, and I remember if Jim Delaporte was sitting here around the audience, he'd be saying, that's what you're elected to do, to make those tough choices.
I get that. I get that. But we have a problem with the budget and raising taxes on our people, whatever you call it, fees or whatever, it's still a tax, some form of tax. We shouldn't do it. I just think it's wrong. I'm opposed to it.
It's just, we are at a time where property taxes do not support public services. It's either that or population's got to stop growing. The more people we have to serve, it's more demand on our services, and we need to have more revenue sources. And we're very limited on what revenue sources that we can be able to provide for the city. So it is a tough choice to make, but if it's something to be able to keep our police department whole, I think that's what all of us are sitting up here to make that tough choice. So,
Is your comment on this topic? Okay, you hold on for just a second then. So to clarify on the utility fee and a franchise fee that would go out to all of those who are receiving a bill from those various entities, which are citizens and a variety of organizations and businesses in town. And some of that certainly would be, well, basically all of it's passed on to the customers of those organizations or businesses. So right now, when I do business in Corvallis, I'm paying part of their utility fee. So one thing to note is that it's not all the citizens of Albany paying that fee. At least we are capturing some revenue from non-citizens that are doing business in our city, which we don't do when we do property taxes.
right. And everyone that is tax exempt, which is a lot of properties throughout the city, do not pay property taxes or hardly anything into our budget here, so.
Yeah, so I do like broadening the base in those types of things.
Yeah.
I understand some of it is, a lot of it would be trickling through to citizens. Rich?
I guess another swipe of the third rail. We'd spoken about fire med, and there were several of us that said, well, gee, how come it's so low? At some point, I asked, well, gee, can we raise that? And somebody, and I don't remember who, said, well, gee, you can't do that. That's done someplace else. And then I hear that, no, we can.
We just did, what, 2 years ago?
Well, but if you're talking $69, $65 for a family, for something that costs a couple of thousand, especially the ones that go to Bonaventure, or I should use the generic term, a retirement home.
Assisted living, it's fine.
And, you know, they use the service over and over and over and over and over. It's unlimited. It's one thing to have a good deal. It's something else to kind of give it away. And I think at $65, that's giving it away. I think the market is considerably above that. Alex would probably have a better idea of how far above it is if he thinks it is. But I'm thinking that, you know, it's not something to be done this year, but it could be got ready to do for next year.
Yeah. I'm not sure about the mix of the participants in that program currently, but in that example you were giving, so if they were a Medicare individual with some sort of supplemental policy.
Medicare Advantage specifically.
So if they, depending on what plan they're on, let's say they have a copay for ambulance, it could be $500, could be $250. So they're paying the $65 to avoid that. So it's a small piece of the thousands of dollars of trip. We're
Right.
still only going to get the Medicare.
So the last client I had to take an ambulance ride from Tangent, it was $980 to go to the hospital. She had fire med, and so she didn't have to worry about that part of it. But Medicare Advantage plans, the deductible is typically $250 to $500 for one way to the hospital for one person. Fire meds, it doesn't have that constraint. So I passed out 10 forms today, so.
Just on that, I was gonna say, a lot of us that pay into fire med, we don't use it. You know, so it's just kind of an extra insurance.
It's like my gym membership.
Happy to say it.
What did you say? Come on.
It's like I mean, seriously, a lot of people buy gym memberships, and I used to work in that industry, and
Oh, yeah,
they
me
would
too.
buy it so they can go when their friends came to town. You know, $19 a month, that's less than the price of pizza, that's why their price is $19 a month.
Yeah.
Fire med is a reasonable solution for a lot of people in my community and the world that I work in, but $65, I know I can name 5 people right off the top of my head. I can't, of course, with HIPAA laws, but I know 5 or 6 cases where in the last 3 or 4 months in different cities, people have had $2,000 tickets for going to the hospital
Yes.
one way.
Oh,
You know,
yes.
so fire med is something that I believe every office in this town should have those forms on their desk.
Me too.
It's a great solution to a big problem.
Yes, it is.
It would also raise money for the fire department, which under the budget was like 173 or something last year. But think about that. If every household had just one solution for that, that's a couple $100,000 that would be into the budget for the fire department. So I mean, it behooves all of us to go out and promote that product. It's on my Facebook page, and I got 100 likes on it already, so it's good.
Go ahead, Bessie.
I want to go back, and Peter or Ed, whichever one could answer this. The library trust fund, or whatever it's called, Carnegie Fund or whatever, what can that be used for? Can it be used for both libraries or just the one library? Both libraries? So in other words, because I had a complaint last year about the back of the library not being painted. They said, well, how, you know, we have this big grant from this lady and stuff, and we're letting it, you know, we're not taking care of it. So I'm thinking, why are we saving this money? I mean, if you got $1.2 million and you're laying off people, I mean, it seems like there's gotta be some better use of the
I
money.
believe it could be used for both libraries, and I'd ask Ed
That's
to
good. I
come.
think he just
Yeah, we
nodded.
do
Yeah.
things for both libraries, yes.
Yeah, so I'm thinking, well, use it. I mean, if there's any maintenance that needs to be done and things like that, let's do it.
We're doing maintenance on the Carnegie Library.
But there's
It's not
maintenance that needs to be
restricted
done on
funds.
the,
Restricted.
well, they just said no. They said it
There's
can
no
be used on both.
restriction.
No, you can use it on both.
Yeah.
No, I mean, no, there's restrictions of what you use it
Use
for.
for, right.
And that's what I'm trying to.
Yeah, so the broadest possible conversation is 27 years ago, the city shook hands with the citizens and said, if you create a foundation, we will support the Carnegie Library. So that's a whole question. We have to remember that history and the hundreds of thousands of dollars that the foundation has given in those 27 years. So keep that in mind. Dwarfs contributions to all the other departments. So that's a positive. And Bessie, I think we're all well aware of the south side of the new library needs to be painted. It's on the docket. I talked with that citizen, and it's like maintenance in any other city facility. We budget it or we don't. We do the best we can, and we're hoping to paint that, in the next year.
That's good.
And we try to use the foundation monies for more creative outreaches, expansion of new programs, endeavors that we can't quite accomplish with the general fund. We try to keep those monies for that kind of thing and do the best we can with our building maintenance funds. But keep those separate that way, and hope that helps. That is definitely on our radar, especially the south side.
Yeah, I realize that. I'm just wondering what it can be used for that would help you out in managing the library, that maybe you wouldn't have to lay off people, maybe, different things. Can it buy books? Can it be this? Because you've got line items, so what can we use it for?
Yeah, pretty. It's like all good endowments. It's broadly written, and it's for the support and maintenance of programs, specifically at the Carnegie, and then also for the library system. And that's exactly what it's been doing for 27 years. Probably, I can get the exact math, but we're at probably about 20% of the cost of the Carnegie is funded from outside sources. So it's been fantastic. It's been really good. We've done a lot with those contributions. So, yeah, it's not broken. It's going well, and the board manages the distribution of the funds.
Yeah, and I understand that.
So I think that's the answer. It can be used for library support, broadly defined, mostly focused on the Carnegie, and it's supporting about 20% of that operation. So it's pretty good.
Just an example of what this citizen was telling me, that this Carnegie could be used for something else. Well, in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, what they've done with their Carnegie Library is they've turned it into City Hall. They've retrofitted it, they've done it, and it's beautiful. And it's a different use. They've got their basic libraries and stuff. And so it just seems to me like, it's probably convenient for some people, but, every time I go to the library, I have to drive, so other people can do that too. So I just think that is something that we really need to look at. Why support two libraries when we can use all of that in the trust fund, the endowments, and actually better the library, the main library? I'm done.
There's no, when you actually dig into the library budgets, there's absolutely no savings closing the Carnegie Library, and I would never support that. Basically, you'd be laying off librarians, and no other departments are laying people off. That would be an inordinate burden on staffing that's already 5 FTE short. It wouldn't save us any money. We'd have to lay off people.
No,
And-
those library, they could be put into the main library.
That's the cost, personnel. There's no savings.
Well,
So-
it has to cost something to run, to maintain, to the
Yeah, there's-
utilities, the heat, everything.
20,000 bucks.
Oh, I think it's more than
No,
that.
well,
But anyway,
I know what it is, and it's 20,000, and you wouldn't save any money, and you'd be laying off library folks, and in the scale of this conversation, it's almost as small as the Maple Lawn consideration. It's pretty
we
small.
wouldn't. My point isn't being taken, so I give up.
I'm going to try one more time. The point that she was trying to ask is, can that be used to do such things as painting the back of the library, yes or no? You danced around it 19 times.
I did not answer around it. I answered directly. We don't
Yes, it
use those monies for creative. I'm not going to repeat myself. We have building maintenance funds that are dedicated when we have those funds. It's not necessary. We're not in that situation. I answered that question pretty clearly, and it's on the docket to be painted. What's not clear about that?
By other funds.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not necessary. It's not needed. We'd much prefer to spend endowment monies on books, on programs, and, yeah.
That is exactly my point. You're choosing to use the money the way you're choosing to use it, even though it can be used outside those uses.
And so, yeah, we have flexibility, and it...
You're just choosing not to. I understand.
So the answer.
Could I make some
Yeah.
comments, Madam Chairman?
Yes.
The Carnegie Fund, if we can call it that, has increased from 290-some thousand, relatively small amount, to about 1.3 million, because we have allowed it to grow with our voluntary committee and some citizens who know about money who have invested it appropriately and done a good job of doing that. And we have taken part of the money and we've helped with the library system. We've redecorated, we've redone pretty much inside and outside of the Carnegie building. Gotten back to historically appropriate light fixtures, for instance, historically appropriate furniture and so forth. And if you start saying, well, we'll spend that all, then you no longer have that fund. You no longer have that help. It's that thing, it's that one-time expense, and then you don't have it next year. So, thanks, Ed, for being a good partner of our committee. And by the way, it's the committee that would decide if he asked to have our money to paint the building, the side of the main library building. And I think if we had the money in income, if our fund is allowed to grow to the point where we have enough money to paint the side of the main library, I think we'd probably do that. This time we don't have enough money to paint the side of the building.
1.2 million covered?
Madam Chair,
just
so
Allocated it.
One for Rich and Bessie, those are good questions, and just, I think Dick makes a good point with the two endowments that we have, the protecting the principal, and, so Oregon Community Foundation, we get about 80,000 a year dispersed from them, and the 2 million or so grows up there. Similarly, the foundation's been giving us, I want to say $40,000 to $50,000 every year, quite consistently, and keeping that principle solid. So, like I said, I think it's working pretty well. And should we need, if we needed to use that and we were completely, had no idea how to paint a building, I think we could get there if we needed to. I don't think we're in that situation right now, but.
Thank you, Eddie.
I was just going to say that for the sake of the committee, the answer to that technical question is that there's nothing in the endowment that prevents their monies from being used for maintenance.
Thank you.
But the endowment committee is
Right.
the deciding factor.
Right.
I mean, it would go against the donor's wishes, because I do know Doris Sharp wanted it for books and things in the library, so.
We can do that at the main library.
Again, both endowments, what should be of concern is that in year one of the biennium, 70% of the general fund monies have been slashed for books and materials. And in the second year, for the first time in 108 years, there are no general fund monies allocated for books and materials. So the foundations are working well, and at their dispersion, that's 100,000+ a year, that's working just fine. The general fund, on the other hand, is, that's where our attention should be.
Thank you, Ed. Colleen?
Well, I know we're going to have to make some cuts somewhere, but I just hope that we can leave the police and fire alone. I think that's very important.
I don't think we have it in the budget book. I'm sure we don't, but did we have charts earlier this week that showed the allocation of the general fund and some information over time about how things are shifting?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's in there.
It is in here,
I wish I could show it for you on the screen, but
Not in the budget.
on the budget.
this is one I've used in the past, which,
Can you put it on the screen?
No,
It's very,
actually, the
Very
screen is not
informative.
working now. What's that?
over time, it's going to suck up the whole thing, isn't it?
Yeah, the general fund, it's a chart entitled General Fund Requirements, which shows a steady increase in public safety funds from 2010 at 79.9% to 2019 at 86.7% of the general fund. So currently, as of last year, we're 87% of the general fund being spent on public safety.
So have you tried extrapolating that on out to where it takes everything?
Well, that's one of the concerns is, the reason that you see the cuts that you saw in the budget that I presented, that was across the board cuts. Okay?
Yeah, I think police and fire are wonderful, but I don't think we can spend everything on them. We just can't afford, well, I don't know, maybe we could, but what kind of a jerkwater city would it be if we spent?
So there's a whole lot of things that go into the general fund, but obviously the property taxes and the safety levy, those are the big things. And as you presented, you've got the PERS increase and the cap on property tax increase. And so I think when we look at other fees, like the franchise fees and the utility fees, we have to look at, I'd look there before going back to increasing the levy, and you mentioned some of the constraints there and limitations it puts on other taxing districts and how we don't get the whole thing when we go out, even if it's approved. And so I guess it depends on whether you think you want to live in a city that doesn't have much of a library or parks and rec department, or if you want to be willing to look at other sources of revenue, and if you want to earmark those sources of revenue for different departments, whether you think that's a better use to say that a utility fee is for public safety, or if you want to do what some other communities are doing and wrap it all up in, that's where you don't get Parks and Rec unless you put it there. And I'm not hearing any agreement amongst the group here, so comes down to votes when we have motions. I'd invite more discussion.
You know, it lands on us now. We talk about tough choices, but we're 28 years now since Measure 5, amended by Measure 50. And I think we talked about it the first time. We're missing compressed $740,000 from the public safety levy. And that's just one, we're not always in compression. It ebbs and flows. But every time when we were in compression, that was money that was missing from, if you put the city on if you had everything figured out in 1996, and if you just put everything in motion from there and planned ahead, you'd have had super high taxes, and that's a whole separate issue. Measure 5 might have happened anyway, but or something like it. But I think it put in motion what's happening now, which is a discussion of utility fees, other things that aren't property taxes. I think that was the whole underlying point of Measure 5. And your option, if you didn't do that, your option was to make cuts. It was forcing us into the situation we are today. And I don't think it was because of mismanagement. And if you read the headlines, it's not just Albany. It's throughout the state. It's not just cities, it's counties, and definitely schools. So, if you don't want to do fees, the other day, Sharon brought up her preference for a utility fee, and we brought up the idea, and to promote it, she brought up the idea of it would hit entities that don't pay property taxes, and then it said, well, those entities aren't really flush. Well, at some point, you can't it's never going to be perfect. You got to decide, I'm kind of just echoing what Sue said, you got to decide what kind of city you want to live in. And I think Sue and I, as lay members, are kind of saying, we want a city that has a robust public safety program. And I'm not going to shoot down and nitpick and destroy the idea of a utilities fee or whatever just because I'm coming back to not only me, but your own strategic plan highlights public safety. And so it is a tough choice, but it was preordained, and here we are.
On that point, if we did decide to do a utility fee, across the board, everyone pretty much pays the same, I think it would go over a lot better if we said, okay, it's dedicated to public safety. And that's it. In other words, it's not going to be used for this and that and whatever, but so that we could actually help the police department keep, do I want an extra fee? God, no, people used to come into the tax office all the time and say, well, I'm on a fixed income. Well, guess what? I'm them now. And I was at that time because anybody who gets a salary is on a fixed income. And so if it's a small increase to start so we can see, maybe that's the way we need to go, but it has to be dedicated, in my opinion. Totally dedicated.
I agree.
Rich? Utility fee is a tax. I mean, you can call it anything you want to, but basically it's saying you're going to use it, so you're going to pay. And it's not about, I get you need money. I also agree with Bill and Alex, Mike. While we may be able to, or the city council may be able to impose one without going to the people, I'm not going to vote for it. We have, just look in Salem right now. $2 billion that you're going to be paying more stuff for, that the legislature just okayed. A cap and trade, you're probably going to get charged more for your natural gas because they just did it. I mean, there is a frustration that, you know, when they say business will only pay, it'll only be people over $1 million. Well, I see a restaurateur back here. He buys from people who do more than $1 million, and he is going to pay it. And when I go have some pasta, I'm going to pay it. So I want the public involved in it, because the public's who's going to pay it.
And as we always know, when it does come to anything of a fee increase, we know who all comes out the majority in opposition. A lot of the folks that are in support will stay silent on it. They don't get as involved. This kind of narrows down, folks, is what kind of community do you want to live in? Do you want our community to start lowering our level of service, which affects our quality of life in our community? That's what it narrows down to. So there's many cities across the state are being faced with these cuts. People can say, okay, my gosh, we're going to cut, and just turn around and just see what happens. We're going to see those impacts. We're going to see the effects. You know, when we start putting higher demands on our city services, and yet the whole state keeps growing in population, our quality of life is going to start lowering. So we have to look at what is it going to take to be able to keep our community still affordable, yet provide quality services. Most people, if you go out now, ask in the community, even if it was $2 a month for a utility fee, which my estimate would be, like, you know, could be wrong here, would be about $500,000 a year. I don't think $2 a month, knowing it would go for public safety, you're going to get a whole lot of people that are going to have a lot of pushback on that. So it's better, but if we went out to try to raise the property taxes, you know, some folks that have higher property values are going to really be squawking about it because they'll be paying more than somebody that has a property that is less in value. So it narrows down to what kind of community do you want to live in.
Yeah, I was going to say, since this is, where's Ed Hodney? There he is. Since this is Ed's last budget, I have to give him credit for the past many years. You know, we keep wanting more parks. You know, any type of development happens, gosh, we're going to do a new park. And it has been so unfair. I mean, I'm thinking, it was so unfair because you don't have the money to take care of them, but by golly, we want some more parks. We can't even fix the playground equipment we have now. And so he has been on, his budget and his people have gone down and down and down. And so I think that's another thing we have to look at is, let's not create more parks. And if we have parks that aren't, you know, I mean, I won't go there, but I just think Ed's done a good job with almost nothing. And I think I saw in here that he's going to cut another maintenance person. I'm thinking, what are you going to do? Have this, I mean, city employees and the council go out and do the maintenance? I mean, there comes a time when you've got to think of this. And, I mean, by me, there's a Grand Prairie Park. I mean, that's a huge park. And I see it used a little bit where the cover is, and the playground is used, but it's on the other side. But then there's a whole bunch of it that's just nothing. Nobody uses it. The basketball hoop is used, I will say that. But this is another thing we can think about is we don't need any more parks. You know, what are we going to do with the equipment that we can't fix now? You know, I just think there's some things. And Peter, I was going to ask you, is there any other way, since you've been a city manager here for so long, another way of getting money? I mean, is there any other way that we can get an income other than a fee or whatever?
Well, you heard, I heard on the radio yesterday about Eugene's effort to implement a payroll tax. So there's another, one that I hadn't thought about.
Oh, that's good because I don't get paid.
Wait, everybody who works will pay.
Yeah.
Well, everybody above a certain hourly wage. I think it's $14 per hour.
Oh, I see. I didn't hear that. Well,
But you ask if I've known it. That's the only one I've heard of since the last time we talked about it.
that has to go to the voters though, doesn't it? Payroll
I
tax?
don't know about a payroll tax.
Yeah, I don't know that either. But I would imagine that, that judging by the council's sentiment, which is that they don't, it sounds like they don't want to place a burden on citizens without citizens.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just
Having input.
racking her brain, trying to think of ways to get increases or cut back on things that we don't need, but, and another thing.
I've been studying alchemy, so maybe
Yeah.
that.
And almost all communities around us have that utility.
Can we play the lottery?
And I do think it's something that we need to, in an upcoming council meeting, really seriously look at alternative revenue sources and weigh it all out and see what it's going to end up approximately bringing in, and we're going to have to make some tough choices.
Absolutely.
But we can't keep kicking that can down the road.
Yeah, I would.
But Corvallis has had a fee for years. I believe Lebanon has them. Salem all over has those utility fees.
I would use that opportunity to say that, we remind you again that as we look 2 years down and 4 years down, it doesn't get any better. So we do need to think about continuing to cut operating costs, but also think about the revenue side as well.
Yeah.
No, Jorge's.
He heard you.
Okay. I don't remember who said, I think it was you, Mr. Thompson, that mentioned that it's not due to mismanagement. And Jorge pointed out that, if there are any areas of mismanagement that the council feels like, they need to work with him and me to identify where those areas are. I think that when that comment was made, it was just a misspeaking, but if there is a sentiment that that's the case.
It was misspoke.
We need to.
I made that statement,
Okay.
and I was just, so I
Yeah.
misspoke.
Okay, and it's just because, and he mentions here just the potential for creating some kind of misperception on the part of the public. And he also points out that we've worked to be open and transparent, and I would point out that that's the first of the city's value statements. Okay?
Well, if there was mismanagement, it has to do with how PERS was set up and what happened back when.
Nothing you can do about that.
Foxes in the hen house.
Sharon?
I do want to say, though, because I know Ed Hodney's been very quiet this budget, sessions that we've been going through, and he's going to be retiring, and I know he's had a really tough budget to have to be able to try to work out, and I don't like seeing any of the cuts either in Parks and Rec, mostly when it comes to our parks maintenance, but it just kind of, when Bessie was mentioning about, a lot of parks, a lot of people don't use them, it brought back some memories when it came to our Measure 4750 days over 20 years ago. We went out to each of the middle schools and had a big forum, like a big town hall, and presented to the community, what we were looking at for cuts and talking about each program. And each one of us counselors were to be talking about one of the programs to, to everybody that attended. And I remember having the duty to take on for parks, to be advocating for parks. I remember back then stating, even if you do not use one of our parks, you still benefit from the park. And that is because when you drive down that road and you see that open space and that landscaped area, and that park and that activity, you are benefiting from it. And I used an example as you went down, when you mentioned Grand Prairie Park, as you went down Waverly Drive, does your eyes go to the house on the left, or does your eyes usually look at the park? When you come into town, when it comes off of the freeway, do your eyes look over at Costco or Winco, or does your eyes look at Waverly Park? So whether you get out and use the park, we benefit just by having parks in our, in our community to be able to enjoy, instead of paved over the whole community with bricks and mortar. So it's just a part of a community's livability, but it does come with a cost. And we do need to be looking at somehow being able to increase funding for our Parks and Recreation program too. That is another thing I think we need to seriously be looking at. And Ed, with that, was there anything that you had looked at that could be, the council could look at for increasing fees that would help out in, for parks? And I know it's, too late for this budget to be able to have increased fees. But since you're retiring, just spit it out.
Just leave your phone off the hook.
So it really wouldn't be appropriate for me to give you a long list tonight. I can say that we constantly brainstorm how we might even further diversify our revenue sources, and we've got ideas, and the University of Oregon students, when they were working for us a couple of years ago, came up with some additional ideas. Some of you sat in on those presentations and thought that some of the more out-of-the-box thinking was worth pursuing. So my successor will have the task of milling through all that and determining which of those proposals, how many proposals they might want to bring forward to you. I don't think it would be fair for me to put anything out on the table right now, except to say that there is potential. And Bessie, just kind of a retort, we haven't actually built a brand new park since 2009. We purchased a couple of sites, but they are still undeveloped. And East Thornton Lake, for example, cost us $500 last year to take care of. So just want to put everything in perspective. Thanks for asking, though.
Thanks, Ed. Sorry to put you on the spot.
No,
So Peter, as this currently sits with this budget, this keeps Maple open for another year, which gives them an opportunity to look for sources of funding or grant money?
Correct.
Okay.
And as I understand it from GAPS and from Ed, the state legislature may come through with funding, but that's not something you can bank on at this point. And also, Ed, you'll recall Ed was working with some nonprofits to see if they would be interested in taking on the task.
Okay. Thank you.
Bill, Mike, comments,
Hey,
questions?
he's presented a balanced budget, and I'm ready to move forward. I think we're beating a dead horse right now.
I agree.
I have to agree with you. So is that a motion?
No. I mean,
Nobody wants to.
I'll make a motion, I'll make a motion that we approve the budget as it stands. Is that correct?
I'll second.
Second.
With modifications.
Okay.
Right?
With modifications.
This resolution before us tonight, which includes the modifications.
It does not include
What we talked about at the beginning.
what we talked about at the beginning with the $150,000 for
LED.
LED projects. It's just a contract. It's just going to be an interfund loan.
Only that modification. I'm just trying to be
Yeah, I
clear.
did
No, she talked about it earlier at the beginning of the presentation.
So the motion is to approve the resolution on the dais with the addition of $150,000 for the LED loan?
LED.
It's the
LEDs.
Yeah, LED
I
lights.
remember having council approve that.
Yes.
They're coming, Jorge's going to go to council this month to do that. So we can fund this project in-house. It's going to be an interfund loan that will be paid back from the savings that we get with the more efficient lighting.
I understand, it's just that
You
it
recall-
hasn't come to the council yet.
Remember we had a discussion about not being able to borrow money because of that charter prohibition against it.
Mhm.
But then the suggestion was look within the city to come up with a loan, so that It was
Well,
council
right, but
direction.
we didn't
We haven't approved,
okay
no, you haven't approved it yet.
the job.
But we have to put it in the budget if there's any expectation that it might.
Where's the money coming from?
It's going to be an interfund loan from Public Works to our city facility maintenance program.
So has that been paying that back?
They're going to pay it back. Who paid it back? Ed?
Just seeing if you were awake.
Okay, so,
I make a motion
Alex
to
made the
approve the
motion.
budget as it stands with modifications.
And it was either Dick or me that seconded that.
okay.
I'll let him pass it.
Any further discussion before the vote?
With reluctance.
Okay,
So it's my understanding that, okay, if we do it as is, then
What's the recommendation is all?
the police don't get any, you keep the people, they don't get any extra people, so basically it's, the cuts are the cuts.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
We're not firing anybody, but we're not filling the holes that are there, which is
We can revisit this again.
You could
at the
do
end
an
of next year.
amendment if you want to, if you wanted to adjust from the reserves to keep police
No.
whole.
That's the
I'm
thing,
not
we
gonna
can't
do
keep
that.
borrowing from those reserves.
I'll wait until it gets to council.
okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign?
Aye.
May I do a roll call vote, please? Sykes?
Aye.
Is that yes?
Yeah, affirmative.
Brenneman?
Yes.
Keller?
Colleen, your vote?
Yeah.
Okay.
Keller's voting yes. Canopa?
No.
Folden?
Yes.
Olson?
Yes.
Summers?
Yes.
Kellum?
No.
Alex Johnson?
Yes.
Coburn?
No.
Bessie Johnson?
No.
Thompson?
Yes.
That's 8 yes, we needed 7, so that passes.
Okay. Motion carries.
It passed by
What'd she say? 8 to,
To 7?
no, 8 to 7, it can't be, that's 15.
Yeah.
What was the vote?
What was it?
No, she said we needed 7.
2, 4,
Wait,
6.
8 was the vote.
Oh, okay.
There's only 12 of us here.
Okay.
That passes 8 to 4.
I can't believe that we're done.
Yeah.
Thank you.
8 to 4.
You notice who the 4 were, though.
Yeah.
3 councilors and the mayor. This will come up again.
Yeah.
All supported at the council. It's just,
Okay,
yeah.
so any other business before us? So our next meeting is Tuesday, May 21st for the ARA budget meeting. And meeting adjourned.